My goodness, my goodness. I feel like it's always something. I feel like it's always people not being genuine. It's always these media companies not giving respect or giving credit when credit is due. People are saying, ESPN is saying, let's not say people, ESPN is saying, who is known for their atrocious lists when they come out every summer or when every time there's a big event going on, like March Madness or like the opening of the NBA season or the opening of the WNBA season, whatever it may be. But ESPN decides to come out and basically they were highlighting and talking about in honor of March Madness officially starting this week in the women's side and the men's side. They were talking about the top 5 greatest college basketball players of all time on the women's side. And they came out and they basically stated that Caitlin Clark, not only is she's not top 5, but a woman who has broken the all-time leading scoring record for both the men's and the women's side of the NCAA is not a top 5 woman athlete on the NCAA side for its college basketball of all time. But it's even crazy to think about because of what I just said. She's an all-time leading scorer in points scored in NCAA history for both male and female. So it would have been a little bit different if they would have came out and said, you know what, Caitlin Clark is not a top 5 college basketball player of all time when we talk about male or female, like both combining, right? That would have been a little different. That would have gave it a little bit more credibility. Even that would have been kind of hard to really not mention her in the top 5, but not being a top 5 female NCAA college basketball player is laughable, it's asinine, it's funny. And then you use Caitlin Clark as the leading headline. Is Caitlin Clark the greatest college female basketball player of all time? And then she's not even top 5 to generate views and generate people to watch the segment, of course. So when we're talking about Caitlin Clark, and I'm gonna play the actual clip. But when we're talking about Caitlin Clark, we're talking about a woman that has literally changed the way an entire sport is covered, changed the way where we're starting to see the women's college game be more popular than the men's game as of late. So when you come out and you say that she's not a top 5 college player of all time and what she did with the Iowa Hawkeyes and everything that she had to go through and going to a mid-major. So we're going to really break this down. We're talking about Caitlin Clark's 22-23 season, 23-24 season. She averaged 30, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals. True shooting was 61.5% from the field. She led Iowa as the number 1 offense in the nation during that span. She was box office. She was legit. Back-to-back national finals from a mid-major program. So it's crazy when we talk about and have conversation. It's just like, when is enough going to be enough? And when are we going to give credit and the respect when it's due? And right now, people are not doing that for Caitlin Clark. So here we go. Let's get talking.
Love how she's transcended the game. I'm not going to go away from that. But in the open, we said, what makes a top 5 player?
It's so crazy because once again, we're talking about Caitlin Clark is not a top 5 women's college basketball player of all time. When I came out in the opening of the stream and I mentioned how Caitlin Clark is the all-time leading scorer from both the male and the women's side. And she's the all-time leading scorer, and they're not including her in the top 5 all-time forwards players on the women's college basketball side when she's top 5 overall in general. If you had an argument, it would have been more so, is she a top 5 NCAA basketball player overall when we talk about all of the players, male and female? Then it would have gave it a little bit credibility if you did not include her. And even that is probably not even true because of the fact that she would definitely be on that list. You don't be top 5. You don't be the all-time leading scorer of all time and not even be top 5 in your specific gender. That makes no sense. But let's get to it. Let's go back to it.
winning. The only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship. And that is the only thing that you can put against her, because the way she has dominated the record books when she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring
asinine statement. I'm gonna let it play out.
Leader and assist leader, a true point guard for the people, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, 2-time AP Player of the Year, all-time leading scorer. She broke the records of Kelsey Plum and Sabrina. Like, literally, there is nobody who has been such a front-facing name through a direct reflection of her skill set. But how can you be a top 5 player if you have not won a title?
Easy, where she's done something that nobody in that top 5 has ever done before, which is not play on a powerhouse team.
It's a great point, which is why I agree with you. Convince me, Ari. We're switching them back.
Again, we read Cheryl Miller's resume. She's a winner. She's a winner multiple times. Yeah. But like, I have a really hard time. It's like paining me to leave Caitlin off this list because of the records, because of what she's done outside of those 94 feet. She has really thrust women's basketball in the mainstream. She has collected her individual accolades. I
get it. I hear you. I get it. If picking,
it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. Not including Caitlin Clark is really insane. Don't really have too many words for it, because of the fact of the matter is people love to talk about, Caitlin Clark did not win a national title, a championship with the Iowa Hawkeyes. She was not supposed to win. It's just like, she was not even supposed to get there. They were not even supposed to make it to the Final Four. They made it to the Final Four. They made it to the back-to-back national championship games due to her greatness, due to her being a transcendent figure, due to her being the only woman in NCAA history to be able to come out and acquiesce when we talk about having scoring, playmaking, doing all these things on the basketball court. Like, what are we talking about? How can you sit up and say that Caitlin Clark is not a top 5 women's college basketball player of all time because she did not win a championship, when she did something that no other individual in that top 5 that they are listing, that they're talking about, ever did, which was not go to a powerhouse school? And we're talking about a woman that led Iowa to the number 1 offense in a span of reaching back-to-back titles. We're talking about the most points in NCAA tournament history. We're talking about the most assists in women's tournament, which was 60. We're talking about a woman that's had the most threes in the NCAA tournament title game at 8. We're talking about a woman that ended South Carolina's 42-game winning streak. We're talking about a woman that brought a new play style and a new excitement and new freshness into the college game, and also that translated to the WNBA game as well. And if you're talking about some of these players that they're talking about that are ahead of her, I get it. We're talking about Cheryl Miller, a legend. We know what she did with the USC. She was 101. She was different. We're talking about Candace Parker with Tennessee, another legend. She dominated. Deanna Taurasi, Maya Moore. But when does teams that you play on get factor in? 4 of those players listed, Breanna Stewart, Candace Parker, Deanna Taurasi, Maya Moore, played with WNBA players during their tenure in college. That matters, giving them a significant edge, a significant boost. When Caitlin Clark didn't have one player outside herself that was a top 25 recruit on her team. That's why when we talk about Caitlin Clark, we talk about her being the chosen one. It's like LeBron James playing with the Cleveland Cavaliers and looking at his counterparts and all the teams that he's had to go up against, and him bringing the Cavaliers to the NBA Finals and then going up against the Golden State Warriors, going against the San Antonio Spurs when he was young in his early Cleveland Cavalier days. How can you sit up and say that Caitlin Clark is not a top 5 women's college basketball player of all time because she did not win a championship? It makes no sense, and it's crazy to me. And let's see. I'm baffled, really, because it comes a point where we have to stop the cap. And I'm just like, when are we going to stop it? when are we going to stop the cap? It comes a point where we have to stop the cap when Caitlin Clark. Comes a point where we have to give credit when credit is due. It comes a point when people are just talking nonsense. She's done so much for the game of college basketball, and particularly women's college sports. And her game is gone or translated. Her game's translated to the WNBA as well. So it's very interesting. So we talk about, look at these players that they have on here. We got Breanna Stewart, who's probably the only player where it's just like, okay, there's nothing really we can say for Breanna Stewart, Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and we got Cheryl Miller. Cheryl Miller, I'm not really going to talk about much about that because Cheryl Miller is a legend, and she's kind of like the Bill Russell during her time for it's like it's something that you had to be around for to really understand her impact and understand what she did. So them having her in the top 5, it's kind of like when people put Bill Russell in the top 5. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. I understand why you do it. But having Caitlin Clark not in the top 5 for his women college basketball players when she's a all-time leading scorer in both the men's and the women's side is ridiculous. It makes no sense. She's an all-time leading scorer in the men's and the women's side, has led in points and assists, back-to-back title games from a mid-major program, and she did not have a top 25 player on her team. And people are going to sit up and say, well, Breanna Stewart, Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, they played on powerhouses. That matters. They played on stacked teams. Breanna Stewart, she played with Stephanie Dawson, Gabby Williams, Nefesta Collar, who is arguably her, Breanna Stewart, Nefesta Collar, and Aja Wilson, the top 3 basketball players in the world right now on the WNBA side. Candace Parker, like, she had a really good team, a solid team. Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Cash, she played with, like Tamika Watkins, like Tamika Williams. I'm sorry, it was like her team was very, very stacked. Maya Moore, Tiffany Hayes, Tina Charles, like Stephanie Dawson. Like, come on, give credit when credit is due. So when we talk about Caitlin Clark, the only player, once again, I'm going to say that probably may not have an argument over is Breanna Stewart, because Breanna Stewart was cool. We'll get into that, but historical. When we talk about historical, Clark is an all-time leader scoring in the men's and the women's side. No player is in that conversation holds that record. Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Cheryl Miller, Breanna Stewart, they're not in that conversation. All-time leading scorer in the men's and the women's game from the NCAA level. Averaged 30 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds per game as a lead guard. Led the nation in scoring and assists. And she wasn't just a elite scorer. She was an elite scorer and playmaker, something we have never seen before. She was getting blitzed. She was getting doubled at times, and not on the totality that she sees for the defensive schemes that she sees in the WNBA forwards of coverage. But she was still a handful to guard, and she was coming past the half court and hitting logo bombs. She's a 4-level scorer, something that the women's game on the basketball court never seen before until she came in. No super team advantage. Stewart, Parker, Taurasi, Moore, all played on dynasty level college teams. Caitlin Clark did not. They were loaded with talent. Clark carried an average roster to back-to-back national title chip games and beat a 42 winning streak team in South Carolina, one of the best South Carolina's teams we have ever seen. That's what Caitlin Clark did. She had no super team. I'm going to say it again. Caitlin Clark did not have a super team advantage in comparison to Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart, Parker, and Diana Taurasi. They all played on dynasty level teams. They were always the best teams on any given night. The Iowa Hawkeyes was an average team with no top 25 players in the world other than Caitlin Clark. That means something. That means something. Others had to deal with a level. None of them had to deal with the level of defensive focus that Caitlin Clark had to deal with on a nightly basis. None of those players had to deal with that because they can always defer to one of the great other players on their team. Maya Moore, Tina Charles, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Breanna Stewart, Gabby Williams, Nefesta Collar. Like, they could all defer at times to elite WNBA talent, which was on the same rosters when they were going on and making those and becoming those dynasties in the college game. So it's really not even, when we talk about historical individual production, Caitlin Clark scoring records, men's and the women's side, 30 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds per game, 61.5 true shooting percentage overall, no super team advantage, playing on an average roster, and the defensive pressure and the coverage that Caitlin Clark had to deal with in comparison to her counterparts. Impact on the game and popularity. Clark has single-handedly broken records on the college side. Not even Taurasi or Breanna Moore has elevated the game as much as Caitlin Clark. She expanded the range of the WNBA's basketball landscape regularly. When we talk about bringing this modern day explosiveness game playstyle that's never been seen before, it's a reason why people tune in. It's a reason why fans are so gravitate towards Caitlin Clark because of her overall impact. So it's very hard when we talk about Caitlin Clark. When you talk about Deanna Taurasi, Candace Parker, Maya Moore, when we talk about all those players, Cheryl Miller, I don't see it. I don't see it. Like Breanna Stewart, 4 national championships and 4 Final Fours. That's hard to overcome. You know, she's probably arguably played on the greatest dynasty ever. Elite efficiency and defense, unlike Caitlin Clark, wasn't a really great defender or a two-way force the same way Breanna Stewart is. So you could give the edge to Breanna Stewart, but for us, like everybody else, I'm taking Breanna Stewart is different. Even though, however, 4 national championships, 4 Final Fours for Breanna Stewart in comparison to Caitlin Clark, who has 0. That's the only argument that I would personally make for Breanna Stewart over Caitlin Clark because of the fact that Stewart has significantly more talent than her. Nafessa Collar, Gabby Williams, they were all on the same team as her. That matters. I mean, she never had to carry the weight or the mantle or having the burden that Caitlin Clark had because she was always on a stacked UConn team in comparison to Caitlin Clark playing on a mid-major team that had no top 25 recruits other than herself, of course. So if you want to say Breanna Stewart is over her, okay, I wouldn't necessarily argue that, fine. But Forrest, Taurasi, Maya Moore, Candace Parker, only Stewart has a case, in my opinion. If we factor in individual greatness, carrying a weaker team, breaking records, and elevating the game, those other players don't come close to Caitlin Clark. If your metric is pure winning, then Breanna Stewart is the greatest women college basketball player of all time. But based on individual dominance, Caitlin Clark is a top 2 women's college basketball player ever, if not number 1. So that's how I'm coming with it. That's how I'm viewing it. That's what I'm going with. But it's crazy. It's crazy to me that we're still not getting Caitlin Clark the respect that she deserves after all these years. And it's March Madness time, so where people are talking about March Madness basketball, but I feel like also the level of competition in the modern era, like the women's college basketball game has evolved significantly since the UConn and Tennessee dynasty days as well. I think the game is better. I think it's becoming more skilled. And Clark dominated in the era where talent was more evenly distributed across multiple programs, and which kind of makes her accomplishments a little bit even more impressive in a way. It's not like the game of the NBA where we're talking about, yeah, it's the most talented, it's the most skilled that we have ever seen, but there's different areas in the game of the NBA for the basketball side that you can point to that doesn't necessarily make it better in comparison to other eras, whether it's everybody playing fast pace, the uses of analytics, everybody shooting threes. When we talk about nobody's playing defense, you can't touch anybody. We're talking about the refereeing and the ability to draw fouls is very easy. When we talk about there's no really specific type of play styles, everybody plays is very, very similar. It's no big man presence in the game today. So unlike for the women's side, I think the women's side is becoming more talented, more skilled. And once again, throughout multiple programs and throughout multiple teams, there's unique talent on some of the teams that Caitlin Clark had to deal with in comparison to when the Tennessee was dominating and UConn was dominating. Like everybody knew that UConn was going to win the championship when Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart, and Diana Taurasi. Everybody knew that Candace Parker and the Tennessee the Lady Volunteers were the best teams in college basketball during their tenure, during that dynasty as well. So I think all that has to play a factor when we are talking about Caitlin Clark, when we're talking about who's the greatest. But once again, I'm going to leave it off with this. Caitlin Clark is the all-time leading scorer, broke Pistol P's record. It's the all-time leading scorer in both the men's and the women's side. To not have her as a top 5 female women's college basketball player of all time is a disservice. It makes speaking and talking about basketball and the content that's coming out about basketball, it makes it very negative. And I know everybody has their own opinions. I know people get paid to give their opinions. I know people can base their opinions on all the different things that they may feel, but personal feelings aren't always facts. And sometimes just because you have an opinion does not make your opinion right or wrong. But sometimes if you have an opinion and sometimes the things that you are saying, if it's not adding up, it is wrong, because you can't sit up and talk about, well, she didn't win a championship, but leave out context of the program that she came from. Cheryl Miller is not bringing the Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back national championships. Diana Taurasi is not bringing the Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back championships. Breanna Stewart was not bringing the Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back championships. Candace Parker was not bringing the Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back championships. And the reason why I can come out and say that, because Caitlin Clark is the first woman ever in the college game and also in the WNBA game that has the play style of being an all-time elite scorer and an all-time elite playmaker. She is a generator. She generates so much offense for everybody, whether it's her scoring or her passing ability, that it's a very difficult play style. And it's a reason why it was the first of the play style that we've seen in the college game and we're seeing right now in the WNBA game. And that just goes to show you how talented and skilled that she is. Being a generator is not easy. We're talking about players like in the NBA game, Steve Nash, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, James Harden from the prime Houston Rockets, his prime James Harden. Like, to be able to generate and score points and assists and be responsible for also getting your teammates open shots and putting rim pressure on the rim and having the defense suck in and you'll be able to kick it out, or setting up your man and leading them with the pass and pushing the ball on the break. None of those players that they have over her, that they're included in that top 5, are doing that. So when we talk about, people got an opinion, people can say, well, Caitlin Clark did not lead the Iowa Hawkeyes to a championship. Well, Caitlin Clark did not play on a powerhouse program. She played on a mid-major program that didn't have any top 25 recruits on her team. In comparison to Breanna Stewart, that had Nafessa Collar and Gabby Williams. In comparison to Diana Taurasi, that had Sue Bird. In comparison to Maya Moore, that had Tina Charles. Like, Candace Parker had Sydney Spencer. It's just level. So it's just hard for me to really take things serious when we talk about this and we're reviewing this, because I'm gonna say it again. Historical individual production. Clark is the all-time NCAA scoring leader on both the men's and women's side. Proven not to just be an elite scorer, but elite playmaker as well. She did not have a super team advantage. These are points for Clark. Stewart, Parker, Taurasi, Moore, all playing on dynasty level teams. Caitlin Clark, loaded with WNBA talent. Caitlin Clark played on a average roster and took them to the national championship back-to-back. Clark, defensive pressure, and we talking about also the competition, the modern era, more talented programs, more talented players. Also, none of the players were seeing the type of defensive pressure that Caitlin Clark received or the attention because they had more elite talent on their roster. Clark dominated an era where the talent was spread, where the defensive pressure was more, where she didn't have the same luxury to be able to say, here, go get me a bucket. I can't do it for you right now. Like when Breanna Stewart couldn't get a bucket, Nafessa Collar and Gabby Wilson get a bucket. So it's like, what we doing? What we really doing? What we talking about here, man? And then I want to talk about SGA. I want to talk about SGA. I want to talk about real quick. SGA, Kevin Durant, SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Russell Westbrook for their MVP seasons. And we don't know if SGA is going to win the MVP right now. Him and Nikola Jokic is having a hell of a season as well. But this is a horrible way to talk about basketball. This is a horrible way to view the game of basketball. This person said that, sorry, but the Canadians, the best player that Oklahoma City Thunder has had. And when we're talking about Kevin Durant, we're talking about SGA, we're talking about Russell Westbrook. These are their MVP seasons. And even though Shai has not won the MVP, right now he is considered, but based on who you ask, potentially the front runner. And we're looking at SGA stats, we're looking at Kevin Durant stats, we're looking at Russell Westbrook stats. When we're talking about 2014 Kevin Durant MVP, 2017 Russell Westbrook, and this will be 2025, the 24-25 season for SGA if he goes off and wins the MVP. Now, I'm going to say this. Durant averaged 50% from the field, 39% from the three-point line, 87% from the free throw line. Elite showing of efficiency from Kevin Durant on all levels. I think the stats actually support Kevin Durant on being the better player out of all these three because Kevin Durant's impact, he's the most portable player this league has ever seen. You can put him in any office, any situation, and he's going to be a threat. He's going to be a valuable option. Looking at SGA numbers and the things that he does on the basketball court, he's phenomenal. He's a calm hooper, plays the game with his own pace, and he's never in a hurry, but always on time, knows how to get to his spots, understands the importance of angles. But what SGA and Russell Westbrook do on the basketball court is very different than Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant is an elite, efficient on-ball scorer, but he's also an elite, efficient off-ball scorer. It's levels. So when you're looking at SGA, you're looking at Russell Westbrook, they are a factor. They've always been a factor, extremely great, but that ball has to be in their hands. So when we're talking about Kevin Durant, I mean, like his impact is undeniable. It's super undeniable. So, and then you talk about Russell Westbrook. 2017 season, Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double first time since Oscar Robertson, a all-around individual great season. And he was averaging a triple-double with no spacing on that basketball team that he had. He had Andre Robertson missing shots. Like he did that team, that was Victor Oladipo before he went to Indiana. Like he had Sabonis, he had Steven Adams. That paint was very, very clogged. And he averaged 31.6 points. He averaged 31.6 points with no room and no space and averaged a triple-double. So, like, what we talking about? what we talking about? Like, SGA is a baller. He's a hooper. He's very, very great. But I think, like, for Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, I don't even think it's close. Like, I know SGA, he's extremely efficient. gets to the free throw line, and I'm not one of those people that are going to talk about field goal attempts and free throw. I mean, I'm not going to be one of those people that talk about free throw attempts because drawing fouls is a skill. But Kevin Durant was an elite God tier on the ball, off the ball scorer, and also was elite putting rim protection in the athlete as well. And also he can play multiple positions on the defensive side of the basketball floor. And people don't talk about his defense, but in his prime, he was a very, very above average defender, especially on the perimeter. Even in his latter years, like he can play and he guards perimeter defense at times. And also, we saw in the Golden State Warriors when they had him playing at the 5. And we know SGA is a great two-way defender as well, a player that gets after on the defensive side of the basketball. But Russ was also, in his prime, a very great on-ball defender at times as well, had a much more all-around game than SGA for his overall just responsibility on the basketball court. And we have to factor that in when we talk about the value. So, and Durant led the league in scoring, carried OKC without Russell Westbrook when he was injured. And he had a legendary streak of 25 plus straight games for 41. He had 25 points or more in 41 straight games during his MVP season. Russell Westbrook, first player since Oscar Roberts averaged a triple-double, had little help, no all-stars on his roster when he won his MVP. His best player went to Golden State Warriors. SGA, amazing efficiency, two-way player, but I feel like he's not having the same type of MVP caliber season as Russell Westbrook or Kevin Durant. Durant is just such a dominant scorer and more efficient scorer and plays on and off the ball. In 2014, Kevin Durant was literally a blur to defend. One hezzy crossover, he was getting to the rim, getting to the cup, putting rim pressure at the rim with ease. Right now, in the latter portion of his career, his jump shot is his rim pressure because he's getting to that mid-range spot and he's putting up, he's hitting that with consistency. As much as he was almost like him, it's like a layup for Kevin Durant. But I just feel like both had stronger individual seasons and just better historic milestones when we talk about SGA, who is favored to go out and win the MVP this year. But I don't think when you look at it, you can't always look at the numbers. You can't always look at the stats because the stats don't always tell the full story. But I appreciate y'all for tapping in to me with me. It's your boy, M.I.K. Smith. Make sure you go like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on AKIS NBA on all the social media platforms. And once again, I'll leave you with this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding in all your ways. Acknowledge him and he will direct your path. Always remember, faith without works is dead. I'm about to get back on this streaming more consistently, y'all. Hope y'all can lock in and tune in with me. And I hope y'all like the content. Y'all, my true tellers in the chat. Wizard game. I'm gone, man. Peace.